Welcome to the third dimension. The United States has vetoed a UN Security Council resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza for the third time, arguing that it would undermine negotiations over a hostage deal. Washington was widely lambasted for using its veto again at a time when nearly 30,000 Palestinians have been killed and more than 2 million people are under threat of famine. A closed-door meeting in Paris of officials and diplomats from Egypt, Qatar and Israel renewed hopes of a potential ceasefire deal, but observers have warned that time is running out to make progress and prevent a looming Israeli offensive on Rafah city. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Prime Minister resigned yesterday along with his government, saying that new arrangements were needed to take into account of the emerging reality in the Gaza Strip. Such a move is believed by many to be part of the United States' pressure on Mahmoud Abbas to reform the Palestinian Authority so it can have a role in Gaza after the war ends. To discuss this topic joins me from Ramallah Mr. Dimitri Diliani. Mr. Diliani is a senior member of the Revolutionary Council and the spokesperson of Fatah Reformist Democratic Faction. Mr. Diliani, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. If we may start straight away from the recent US veto on the UN resolution, calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the US ambassador to the United Nations commenting on this veto saying that a ceasefire without requiring Hamas to release hostages would fail to bring durable peace. She went even further to call that vote wishful and irresponsible. How do you react?
This is a classic case of the tail wagging the dog. Israel controls what positions the Biden administration takes when it comes to any position with ramifications on the ground, and for most definitely United Nations Security Council resolution would have political ramifications on the Israeli stance amidst this genocide. The United States of America, through its ambassador, through its Secretary of State, through its officials of the National Security Council and others, have been saying one thing, and on the other hand, implementing totally different policies than what they are saying. At one hand, they are showing verbal concern regarding the high volume of civilian victims of the Israeli genocide in Gaza, even though they do not term it as such. And on the other hand, they are providing the bombs that actually kill and slaughter these people. So we do not take the United States or the Biden administration's rhetoric, which is mainly directed towards internal electoral reasons, seriously. And we look at the final product, which is the actual physical or the policies that do translate into physical ramifications on the ground that our people pay the price for. This is the 46th time that the United States has used the veto right in favor of Israel against the world. 36 of these times were coming against resolutions that are in favor of the Palestinian rights. So this is not a Biden administration issue. It's a historical political stance that has to play into the United States power equilibrium around the world, its defiance of the United Nations, and it's willing to step over its proclaimed values of democracy and human rights in favor of the supremacist genocidal state of Israel.
If we now move from the US vote to another issue, Mr. Diliani, which is the ICJ ruling on Israel, and we all know that yesterday marked the end of deadline and Israel was supposed to respond to the ICJ ruling. In the same context, Amnesty International said yesterday, Mr. Diliani, that Israel failed to take even the bare minimum steps to comply with the ICJ ruling. Here, the question is, what makes Israel so confident to dare defy such world judiciary institutions?
Well, it's very simple. And moreover than Amnesty International, Israel, for the past month, have slaughtered 3,800 Palestinians. Most of them are women and children, and has continued with its genocidal, indiscriminate bombardment. Israel knows that the ICJ does not have the power to enforce its rulings. All its rulings are going to go to the United Nations Security Council for action, and they know, and they are betting on United States veto to save the day for them. But this might be a tactical maneuver on the political side, but nobody can argue that this is not a wise movement, because it does carry an international political weight. It does create more of grassroots opinion that is not so friendly to the state of Israel. And we can see this every weekend translating into protests all throughout Europe and the United States and Asia, denouncing Israeli war crimes and genocide. Israel, in the long run, needs to realize that these people coming out on the street and the increasing support for Palestine would also translate into political decision in the ballot box. These are democracies in the West. They are not like Israel, Jewish-only democracy. They are democracies carrying the true meaning of the word. So if the people have certain attitude, certain opinion on an international matter, whoever's coming next better adopt that, even if not he or she is convinced. In other words, Israel is not looking at the next day, because the decision maker in the state of Israel, whether it was Netanyahu on one side or his partners, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, know for sure that there is no political life for them in the interim period once the war is over, and they will lose elections. And statistics show that maybe people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir will barely make the cutoff edge and maybe come up with 1 or 2 Knesset marginal seats, while Netanyahu will be in the opposition with an average of 18 to 19 seats, which makes him, which is substantially less powerful than what he is today. Yeah. And also with all the political and judicial cases waiting for him after this war, maybe you can say that he is not going to be in the political scene for quite some time. So they are looking at the end of the war as it is, end of this political period. They try to achieve their personal goals. They don't think strategically for the state of Israel. They don't think that the state of Israel today is being discovered and unraveled in front of the world for the true racist, supremacist, genocidal state that it is. Yeah. They don't care about that, because they're not going to be in the next period. They're not going to be paying the political price for this. But on the other hand, actually, for them, they're going to be in the opposition, mocking whoever is going to come next and blaming it on him or her.
Yeah.
So I see that Netanyahu is not working strategically with this.
Yeah.
His defiance of the ICJ is not a strategic move.
Yeah.
I think it does have political ramifications, not immediate, but most definitely through this election year, whether it was in the United States or in Europe. And we can see, you can read what the European Parliament, how things are shaping around the genocide, the question of the genocide in Gaza, how domestic politics are even shaping in Europe. This is how powerful this events, this is the most documented genocide in history. You can see how powerful it is and how powerful the divide line between who are genocide sympathizers and supporters and who are humanitarian opposing this genocide. And I believe, and I truly believe, that the humanist values, social values of these countries and the democratic ways of these countries will prevail over the political alliance drawn by the current politicians.
Okay. Now, always, Mr. Diliani, we are talking about the statement made by Amnesty International and even Human Rights Watch yesterday, commenting on Israel not complying with the ICJ ruling. Okay, and this will bring us to the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Both organizations commented saying that the number of aid trucks entering Gaza has actually decreased by roughly 1/3 since the ruling was issued. In other words, as if Israel not only killing Palestinians, but weaponizing food.
Absolutely. And according to Fatah's Reformist Democratic Faction's statistics that we have published in an official press statement yesterday, the aid trucks that enter Gaza have decreased by 40%. And in the past week, there were less than 258 trucks during the whole week in comparison to 500 trucks a day before the genocide. So 250 a week as compared to 3,500 a week before the genocide, knowing that during the genocide, people need more aid since the 85% of the Palestinian people in Gaza are displaced. They left their homes, they left their belongings, and they would need more aid. So instead of tripling or quadrupling the number of aid, it became more like 8% of the aid during last week. And these are the numbers that we calculate through our people on the ground as Fatah's Reformist Democratic Faction. Yeah. Israel is using starvation as a tool, a political tool, as a way of enforcing its political will upon the Palestinian people. This is another form of terrorism, one of the worst kinds of terrorism. It is in the classic definition of genocide. Israel has no defense of this except for more lies like they do about everything else. These lies they do not pass the litmus test of the international organizations and countries that do have presence and representation one way or another in the Gaza Strip. So yes, Israel is weaponizing food, medicine in its genocidal war against the civilian people of Gaza.
Okay. Mr. Diliani, yesterday we saw the Prime Minister resigning along with his government, the Palestinian Prime Minister, and in the resignation statement he said, "The new stage and its challenges require new governmental and political arrangements that take into account the emerging reality in the Gaza Strip. The question is, what new reality that the Prime Minister was talking about?
Well, the resignation of the government of President Abbas is in fact irrelevant. It's changing names, faces, but we live in a presidential political system, and if the change did not happen at the president's level, then everything that follows is basically irrelevant, just changing names with the same policies, since the president is the one that actually forms the government and puts its policies, and the government is a mere executing the plans and the platform of the president, just like what happens in every presidential political system, like the United States, like Egypt. It's the president who sets the policies, not the government.
But if I may interrupt you here, Mr. Diliani, Now, according to some, because we are talking about a resignation of a government in a very critical time, and to some observers, they thought that this resignation was a result of a US pressure on Mahmoud Abbas himself to impose reforms on the Palestinian Authority. Perhaps they can play a role in future in Gaza. How do you react?
Well, such observers are not really observing very well. That is that the Abbas political system is not only irrelevant to Gaza, it's basically irrelevant to Palestinians' lives. It's evident this is a failing political system that hasn't been through elections since 2005 for the presidency, 2006 for the PLC, which was canceled by the president, that does not have an independent judicial system. The whole system needs to be changed, not merely changing operatives. The government is it's like any corporation. You have the chairperson and the CEO, and you would have the COO, the chief operating officer. What happened is changing the COO. The CEO doesn't put policies, just execute them. And this is what we need, changing policies. And changing policies will not happen without elections, would not happen without changing in the presidential, at the presidential level. That's why it is essential to make the point that whoever thinks that this is a beginning of change, or would result in a change, or actually affects any walk of Palestinian life, is totally mistaken. This is irrelevant. If you walk today, whether in Ramallah, Jenin, or even Rafah, nobody cares. The only people that care about it are international media and thinking and creating news around it, even though nobody even pays attention. Newspapers, I mean, government affiliated newspapers don't even care much about it. People that are opinion makers for the benefit of the president don't even write about it. This is how unimportant this issue is. And when I say it's irrelevant, I truly mean it is totally irrelevant.
Okay. I just raised that question, Mr. Diliani, thinking that the reshuffle or the resignation of the government may have a role perhaps after the war ends. That's what I wanted to ask. Now, finally, Mr. Diliani, okay, how do you see now, what do you see on the horizon, the future of this Israeli genocide against Palestinians?
Well, in terms of when would it stop, this depends on the negotiations right now between Hamas, the Americans, the Egypt, Qatar, and the Israelis, with international observers from all over different countries. This is about where it's going to end, what's going to happen the day after. What we need is a national, Palestinian national initiative that is supported by major Arab countries like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Jordan, Qatar. all these, they have to agree on a vision. We do have something that was declared, a vision, an initiative that was declared in the New York Times in an interview with Mr. Mohammed Dahlan that reflects that direction. It reflects that initiative.
Yeah.
And this initiative would be as having for an interim period an independent Palestinian politician. He or she would form a government.
Yeah.
Abbas would turn into ceremonial phase until things will phase out and end up with elections. This government would rule Gaza and begin the reconstruction process, and would also do the reform in the West Bank, and would rule the West Bank, the areas of the PA and the West Bank. All will come together at the end in an elections that would set the concrete steps towards a two-state solution.
Yeah.
We understand this is the general, this initiative represent the general direction of all the players. We don't see any other initiative. We have this, or we have the Netanyahu plan, which barely makes the definition of a plan. It's not even a plan. It's just unrealistic wishes. But this is the only thing we have on hand, and we have to stick with it. The change of government is only a very weak attempt to thwart the momentum that this initiative is taking. This is as simple as that, because it goes against the personal interest of people ruling Ramallah right now. And they know for a fact they have a hard time governing Ramallah itself, let alone governing Gaza.
Okay, I'm afraid we have to leave it there, Mr. Diliani. Thank you so much for talking to Yemen Today TV. It's always a pleasure having you on Yemen Today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's all for this time. See you next week with a new edition of The Third Dimension.